This is a bucking leprechaun. Welcome to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. You know, there are three things you should always be aware of. The Ides of March, an MP offering you candy, and the rounded top. Stacy?
I might say you should beware of leprechauns, especially it's still hanging around with you after a few days after St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, this is David Drum, apparently. This is his new job. He's getting ready for a stint in jail.
He won't stop carrying you. Actually, when we were in Dublin, we learned from a taxi driver that leprechauns are bad news. They're not the cute, charming little things that most people in America assume it is. That they're actually like very nasty about protecting.
They're nasty little trolls.
Their hoard of gold.
Yes.
So it's, I think, quite relevant to the headlines we have today because we're talking about the impact of negative rates, the continuing impact of negative rates. And the first headline is from Harry Dent on wolfstreet.com. This chart shows the first big crash is likely just ahead. So we had the bull market from 2009 to May of 2015, and it looks like the rounded top. Ooh, that's bad news, apparently, for chartists.
Yeah, that's right. It's a big rounded top, and this is a prelude to what could be the echo crash after the 2008 crash, because it's all artificially stimulated by money, but there was no earnings. The companies have not made any earnings with all that free money. They bought back a lot of their stock to pump up their earnings and make it look like they're doing something, but they're not actually doing anything. And the underlying fundamentals are horrible.
As you see, Max has a very good relationship with leprechauns, and leprechauns are the ones behind here. Here's where the pot of gold, it looks like a rainbow, doesn't it? The rounded top. And the pot of gold is there for them. They're going to suck it out because this is the, remember Max told you can't taper a Ponzi scheme. And here is when the Fed tried to begin tapering the Ponzi scheme. That was in August of 2015. That's when it all began to go down. And then, of course, this is when they began to actually raise rates.
Well, banks have had 600 rate cuts since the 2008 crisis to try to goose this economy, to try to stimulate this economy. But there's no pot of gold, as the David Drummond leprechaun, right? David Drummond? What? What's that? No, absolutely. He stole the pot of gold through
allegedly,
malfeasance.
he's been arrested. He's been charged. They're saying he's stolen all this Anglo-Irish money.
Where's the Anglo-Irish money, David Drummond? Where did you steal? Where did you hide the pot of gold?
So here we have, you can't taper Ponzi because the Fed has reduced quantitative easing. They tapered quantitative easing, which was them buying the assets, driving up the stock market bubble over the past few years. And to show you how big the bubble became, Harry Dent shows the proof. He's saying that the financial news like Bloomberg and CNBC have been denying that there is any sort of bubble. The black line going up, that's the stock market bubble leading from 1994 to 2000. So that's the NASDAQ bubble. And you see, if you lay over the 2009 to 2015, we have our current bubble. If you could see the NASDAQ bubble, and we all know in retrospect it was a huge bubble that didn't get back to where it was before for another 10, 15 years, well, we have a bubble now, and that's rolling over.
Right, well, the GDP has been revised down by the IMF and by Osborne here in the UK. They've revised down the growth forecast for the economy because all of this monkeying around with the financial system has not produced legitimate growth.
No, I keep seeing David Drum there, and it's
David Drum.
He's keeping mum. That's the best. Of course, he's exercising his Fifth Amendment right to not speak.
Yeah, David Drum, where's the money? What? Oh, he's clamming the fit.
So Harry Dent warns that stock market bubbles don't just like go down slowly; they crash, and they typically crash 70 to 90%.
Holy mackerel!
So he's warning that when that happens and the S&P 500 falls to new lows below the 1,810 threshold, reality might finally kick in. The markets will then see a more serious wave down, likely into around early July or so of 2016, and eventually it'll carry the Dow to around 5,500 to 6,000, likely by late 2017. The greatest crash of your life is just ahead.
Being thrown off a rainbow. I think this is what we're going to happen here at the very apex of the rainbow. You can swan dive into a vat of Oh, I don't know. Peat moss?
Bog. Some
Bog?
bug. Now let's move to gold because there's the crash coming ahead because they're attempting to taper a Ponzi, or at least they're trying to trick you into thinking that they're tapering a Ponzi. Some argue that the Fed has only raised rates a little bit in order to be able to cut it when this crash comes. But there's a remarkable story. Again, Max was right about this, and we foresaw something like this coming ahead, and that is the reinsurance market. Munich Re, and with negative rates, it demolishes the insurance industry. And here we have it, world's largest reinsurer buying gold to counter negative rates. So Munich Re is one of the largest reinsurance companies in the world. Warren Buffett is a big owner of it. He owned about 12% of the company and then started shedding shares. And in December, when the Fed raised rates and the ECB cut rates negative, he dumped half of his holdings because he said it was a bad business and it no longer made sense. Well, because of negative rates, German reinsurer Munich Re is boosting its gold and cash reserves in the face of punishing negative interest rates from the European Central Bank, it said on Wednesday.
Yeah, I mean, this is really something we've been talking about that is gone unnoticed, that the insurance industry needs a positive rate spread to exist. That's how it works. If you have negative interest rates or 0% interest rates, the function of insurance, paying out claims, doesn't work because you don't have the architecture of the global system has been completely destroyed. So that the fact that they're buying gold now is remarkable because they're saying that we are looking for some place to park our hundreds of billions in the entire industry that is going to give us at least some kind of chance to pay out these claims going forward. Now, the entire gold market is $6.5–7 trillion in size versus a derivatives market of over $1 quadrillion. And as that derivatives market collapses, and as firms like General Re or the entire insurance market looks to redeploy assets out of the crumbling derivatives nightmare and into gold, that $7 trillion market cap for gold will go to 14, 21, 36, 40, 50, $100 trillion. And so that's where the price expands. That's where you get $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 per ounce on a price of gold. As this global Ponzi scheme collapses, and Janet Yellen's now deferral of any rate rises proves you can't taper a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
And people are now looking at gold and understanding that, hey, this is the last bastion of value in the world after it's been completely destroyed by these marauding psychopaths that run the central banks.
I think the gnomes of Zurich, the gnomes of Switzerland, I think they're friends with the leprechauns of
The
Ireland.
gnomes are very friendly with the leprechauns, who are very friendly with the little people of Iceland.
Yes.
And the little people of Iceland were behind all the arrests in Icelandic bankers.
Oh, okay.
They were trying to tell the leprechauns to arrest guys like David Drum, and now he's arrested. So pretty soon it'll be a trifecta of invisible little people who are ruling the financial underworld to get these guys down into Hades where they'll be pummeled with negative interest rates.
Do you still have anything to say yet, David Drum? He's keeping stum. You know, here we have Munich Re buying up gold, which is a remarkable signal. I think the people will be behind them. Like, people will also rush into gold when rates go negative across Europe. Now, I read an interesting thing about the U.S. is the U.S. is in a real bind because, unlike Europe, they have those money market, those mutual funds. So, they can't break the buck. So remember during the 2008 crisis, that's what happened in those money market funds. Once they broke the dollar, all hell broke loose, and that's when TARP came in, and there's trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in there. So they can't go negative because of the trillions in those funds. Yeah,
the money market fund is one of the first derivatives introduced by Merrill Lynch in the late 70s, early 80s. It's a surrogate for cash that allows you to have instant access to various stock trading accounts and then have your excess reserves or cash invested in a money market fund, which is not really money per se. And now if they go below the par value per unit of money market, that 100 cents on the dollar threshold, people will suddenly realize that, oh my God, my money is being confiscated. And then they'll they'll rush into gold.
Gold, yes.
And where these guys, the leprechauns of the world, know where the gold is. And the little people and the invisible people.
And the gnomes.
The fairies and the gnomes.
Yeah.
That's what we're going back to, an economy of paganism. And as
Yes.
I've been warning about
we
for
have
quite some time,
unicorns.
monotheism isn't working. Paganism and invisible leprechauns are the future.
And of course, the leprechauns ride unicorns, at least in America. And, you know, going back to these rates and negative rates and the U.S. trying to taper their Ponzi scheme. Now, Janet Yellen this past week, of course, did signal that they're not going to raise rates, or maybe only one or two more times.
Unlike Rice Krispies, by the way, which is a product from Kellogg's, which has been subject of a video of a worker urinating into the vat of Rice Krispies on the conveyor belt. I've been told by the David Drum leprechaun that this does not affect Lucky Charms cereal.
Okay, well, let's move on to what Janet Yellen said. And she said, Yellen, rise in labor force participation is heartening. Seriously? So here she was looking over a four-leaf clover. See, it's even in green. Yellen says this is heartening. The little rise in participation rate in the United States. So, you know, you have the unemployment rate, those who are unemployed, and then you have the participation in employment. So the unemployment rate has gone down to as low as before the crash. But as you see, people are not actually working. They've just fallen off.
Yeah, well,
the rounded
this
top.
rise in participation rate are the undertakers
that
are not burying all the dead people thanks to Yellen's irresponsible monetary policies.
Well, she claims that this is heartening and that this is a sign that the U.S. economy is rising over the four-leaf clover on back of their unicorns, and the leprechauns are going to show them the pot of gold at the end of Janet Yellen's labor participation rainbow.
But you can't raise rates because otherwise she would trigger a global sell-off in the global bond market, as these insurance companies are now pointing to.
With that, I will say this is the end of the program for this episode of the Keiser Report with David Drum, our special guest.
All right, well, it's goodbye, David Drum, off to jail. Stay tuned for the second half, a whole lot more. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. I'm Max Keiser. Time now to go to Johannesburg, South Africa, and speak with Lorien Gamaroff. He's the CEO of Banky Moon. Lorien, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Hi there, Max.
Hey, we wanted to touch base with you because South Africa is becoming a very big player in cryptocurrencies, in Bitcoin. There's a lot happening. Tell us about what's going on with your company.
Sure. So I'm focused on building products and services based on blockchain. There is a growing tendency now for banks and other organizations to try and investigate it and see what all the buzz is about. You know, there's a lot in the press about blockchain and how it's going to transform the world. And I think now they're feeling the impetus to now actually move in the space and see what they can do.
Yeah, I noticed that in countries like in the US or the UK, on Wall Street or the City of London, these are the entrenched players, the oligopolies that have been around for a long time. And so they are trying to understand how this is a threat to their business. But in places like South Africa or almost everywhere else in the world, but particularly all over Africa, people are embracing this as a way to leapfrog the last century model of banking and to establish a whole new way to do banking and moving money around and do business. And do you see evidence of that in Johannesburg?
Yes, absolutely. You know, we must remember that in Africa, 80% of the people don't even have bank accounts. So it's very easy for them to look at these little fintech startups that are coming up and helping them do mobile payments or peer-to-peer lending and not even consider traditional banking structures, just simply because they've never had to before.
I know we've sent you a StartCoin node, and we've sent you some Start Coins and some Start Wallets to try to spread the StartCoin message, because these are free coins to give away. We've got millions of them to get people introduced to crypto and to crowdfunding. And tell us a little bit about your crowdfunding for schools in South Africa. What's going on there? The project, how much are you raising? What platforms are you using?
Right, so just some background. In South Africa and in fact across Africa, there's a big drive to roll out prepayment systems for utilities, simply because it's always been very difficult once you've supplied energy to an individual or an organization to then go and recover the costs from them. So a lot of meters are now being converted into prepaid meters. But now that introduces another whole level of difficulty, because people mostly transact, they live in a cash economy. And to make payments for utilities as well as other things is very difficult. It's inconvenient and expensive when you have to make payments for electricity or water with cash. And so I used to work in a smart grid company, and we were faced with this problem, trying to find ways for people to easily make payments for these services. And I was very involved with Bitcoin. I felt like that as a currency will certainly be able to solve a lot of problems here in Africa, where people don't have access to convenient electronic payment systems. So I developed into the vending system that we had the ability to take cryptocurrency, in particular Bitcoin. Then what I thought after that was to actually now provide that service to other utility companies, not just my one. But at this stage, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, as a currency, it's not really very useful right now, simply because most of all people haven't really heard about it. And if they had, there's always a negative connotation. But also just the price is very volatile. So I thought, instead of wasting the technology, let me now build this into a crowdfunding platform. So what we could have is schools, needy schools throughout the country and throughout Africa. They could have a blockchain-enabled meter, and then people could, from around the world, make payments directly to that meter. And in that way, they could bypass an organization which would opaquely distribute the funds. So I developed Osizo, which means help in Zulu, and we did a pilot case where we installed a Bitcoin meter in a little school outside of Johannesburg, in a town called Soweto, not very far from where Nelson Mandela grew up as a boy. And we then had a MIT, there was a delegate at MIT at a conference, and they sent Bitcoins to the school. And it was very impactful. We could see it happen immediately. It took a few seconds to arrive, and it was very powerful. So we'll be rolling this out now. We're going to be going throughout the country. We'll make a selection on a few schools. We're going to make sure that they are worthy, and we'll be rolling out the platform soon. The nice thing about the platform is that it will be able to take any cryptocurrency. We'll support all the major ones. And I met Chris Ellis at the Bitcoin conference that we had here in Johannesburg a few weeks ago. And he actually gave me some Start coin on a card. And so I thought, well, that's a great initiative. I've been aware of Start Join. Why not accept Start coin? And so here we are.
Great. We've got millions of those coins to give away, plus we've got a community that's very interested in this. And you mentioned the process of overcoming what I would call financial apartheid or interest rate apartheid. The banks have put up these barriers that have prevented folks from accessing basic banking infrastructure. And there needs to be a movement to overcome this. And there you are in South Africa, where you've already had a huge political movement to overcome apartheid. And now it's really another form of apartheid. And I noticed that Oprah Winfrey, who's a multi-billionaire, opened some schools in South Africa. So what is the actual legislation, if that's a factor, on the school opening? And can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I'm not sure what the impact it has on legislation, but certainly there are needy schools around the country, and education is a problem. Each school does get a small budget, but it's very difficult to make ends meet. And just with respect to energy, we have a crisis going on in this country. Where there's demand, but the utility providers cannot sustain that demand, So certainly, there's a need for education, and with respect to a crowdfunding platform like this, we might be able to go a long way to providing that sort of support where they can, boost the standard of education.
Okay, and you mentioned that Bitcoin has been volatile, but over the past year, it's been a lot less volatile than the South African rand. The South African rand has been much more volatile than Bitcoin, as well as the Brazilian real, the Russian ruble, and dozens of other currencies around the world. Bitcoin's been almost a paragon of stability. But I just wanted to run through this process again, because In other words, you have a need to fund schools, so you opened it up through a crowdfunding platform that allows people using Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to instantly help fund those schools. And so you've, in a way, just completely busted all of the infrastructure of, let's say, a United Nations or a World Bank or an IMF, who would come in and they would set up a committee, and then they'd hire some people on the ground, and then they'd have all that is unnecessary. You simply have a very transparent model. Here are the kids, here's the school, here's the Bitcoin address, send in a couple of Bitcoin, now the kids are learning, and that's it, right?
That's right. You can target directly now that cause that you believe in. And because it goes from a machine to a machine, you don't need that whole layer of intermediaries that are now administrating and making decisions about where that money goes to. You can look at the school, you can see the need, and you can focus your funding directly onto that particular need, in this case, energy. And it absolutely, this sort of way of making payments around the world, because it's very cheap to send cryptocurrencies around the world, and you don't have to ask for permission. You can send as much as you like. This is absolutely going to transform that whole model. And also, it's not limited to energy. It could be anything. And we know that BitGive, they're trying that sort of thing up in Africa with whales. So this can extend further. We can find those people, whoever they are, and we can directly now fund them if we believe in that cause. So it certainly is going to be an interesting for the typical NGO type organization.
Right. The whole NGO model as such gets disrupted or disintermediated with the transparency, the technology, and cryptocurrencies. Let's talk about energy for a second, because obviously that's a big factor in your model there. What about solar energy? I don't know if you've looked at this or not, but it seems like there's a lot of projects in Africa now that are harnessing solar energy and then using crypto and the blockchain to pay people a solar dividend, if you will. In places like Berlin and other spots around the world, people are actually net energy exporters. They're gathering more energy than they use in the household, and they can sell the excess back to the grid, back to the government, and they're making a positive cash value for that. And crypto makes that possible if you create a solar coin, a solar contract. Have you looked at solar energy? I realize this might be coming out of the blue, but it seems like it's becoming a big factor in Africa. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, not really out of the blue. I have been in touch with people who are doing that very thing, where you can have independent solar providers and then use cryptocurrency to make payments. So you can donate, if you like, a panel to somebody, and then they will make payments via cryptocurrency. So that I feel, simply because we're having such a disaster really with our own energy suppliers here, those types of solutions are definitely going to be gaining interest. And that's not necessarily because they're technologically more superior or more cost-effective, but just because there's no other choice. Either we deal with the rolling blackouts that we've been having here, and in fact, we've been having a whole cycle of these, but recently we haven't. And everyone has thought that our power suppliers have been kind of waking up a bit and switching things on a little bit better. But it's actually just because our economy is not doing so well. So the demand, isn't as it used to be. But that solar is big in South Africa. We've got a lot of sunshine here. We've got some very large solar plants. But I think it will become a case where individuals now start rolling out solar power, and in combination with blockchain technologies, I think it's going to be a very practical way of providing energy to our big market.
Yeah, Lorien, excuse me, what's quite frustrating for me is when I hear various governments talk about blockchain and they mention that it enables money laundering or drug use or terrorism, and they completely overlook the fact that it's enabling communities to cost-effectively solve problems and reduce the strain on governments. It's any government that is looking askance at blockchain and Bitcoin right now, it has not done their homework. They're simply showing their hand as inept and incompetent by slamming crypto and slamming Bitcoin. Is the government in South Africa more positively favoring this blockchain technology than in some other countries?
Well, they are looking into it. I have sat with our Financial Intelligence Center, and our Reserve Bank has come out with a statement, which is actually quite light-handed. They're having a wait-and-see approach. But we do have...
All right, sorry, we're out of time. But Lorien, that's great information. We'll catch up with you soon. Thanks for being on the Keiser Report.
Thanks for having me.
All righty. Hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I'd like to thank our guest, Lorien Gamaroff of Banky Moon. If you'd like to get in touch, tweet us at Keiser Report. Until next time, bye, y'all.